Welcome to episode 103 of BrainThunder. We're very excited to have our first guest with us here today. Partha, can you introduce him?
Sure. So we're kicking off today's episode with our first ever guest, Mahyar Tousi, who is a political commentator with his own political YouTube channel. He has a very large following and often talks about the issues we'll talk about today on national media. So definitely someone who knows his stuff. Welcome!
Welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Excited
Thanks
for coming. We just want to find out a little more about you and your background with politics, and when was it when you first started getting involved, and what was your experience like?
Sure. I guess in terms of getting involved, it was at university, like a lot of people. But the reason for that is all because of my background and my upbringing. So I was actually born in Iran. My mum had to come here as a political refugee to escape the regime and the government in Iran. And when you're born and grew up in those countries like Iran or Russia, where on the surface it seems fine, it's not like a country at war or anything, but it's politics and everything actually affects you on a daily basis more than even here. So you're always aware, you always have to be interested anyway. So you wake up, you have to check the news and the papers. So I came here and I was always more ideological before I knew which party I should belong to. So unlike a lot of people who get involved because they think, oh, I'm Labour or I'm Conservative or Democrat or Republican. For me, it was about the ideas first. And then I had to check to see which side is closer to my side. So I got involved and I still have friends from all different parties, but I belong to the Conservative Party.
So we don't want to talk about political positions in this podcast, but we do want to talk about millennials and their relationship, I guess, with politics. And we feel that although millennials understand that politics is a theoretically very important concept, they feel disconnected. So why do you think that is?
So it only seems big now because of social media and because it's more open. It's always been like this.
Yeah.
People throughout the world, or at least democracies, are always disillusional in terms of the political system. But they still go out and vote eventually. And there are people who never vote, and that's always going to be there. And I think that it's a good sign sometimes. So they always say that in a kind of functioning liberal democracy, people generally are not interested in politics. It's bad. But technically, it's a sign that things are generally okay. It's always in countries and in systems where it's a bit of a mess that people actually are very involved. For example, you have countries like India and other countries that technically have elections, like Iran. And people know they're not real elections, but people still queue for like half a day to vote. Whereas here, not many people actually kind of bother to actually go out to vote.
Yeah. Back on what you said on social media, I definitely agree that we discussed this actually in our previous episode, that it gives people more of a voice when it comes to expressing their opinions. So obviously the noise is louder, but when you say that it also comes from the fact that there is a lot more information out there, so people are more aware of what's going on, and there's more visual information being shared.
Yeah, there is more access to information. So there was the problem with humanity throughout the last few centuries was that information was only concentrated with the elite, and only some people knew all the information and what was happening. So it's good that all of us now have access to information and what's actually happening. But there's an overload, so there's a lot of misinformation that's going out there, and because especially our generation, we are always in a rush and we're impatient and we don't necessarily want to do our own research, so we don't even actually watch the news even properly, actual news apart from the headlines. We don't read them. So people get their news through memes, through Instagram, like a article, that the actual headline of an article, without actually clicking on it. So they say, well, for example, that this paper or this meme says that this politician is that, so I believe it.
Exactly.
Without realizing what the actual fact is.
No, I think that's a sign of laziness?
Absolutely. We are becoming more intellectually lazy, and it does have to change.
But don't you think that from the fact that people are aware that fake news exists now, people are more careful with the information that they read online and not always take it at face value?
So you're right that people are aware that fake news exists, and they even think that, okay, I'm going to be careful. But the biggest flaw in humanity, again, is that we have a lot of flaws, but the things that we know are bad for us in life, whether it's work, business, dating, I shouldn't date this type of person, we still end up doing it anyway. So with fake news, we have this problem with subconscious bias, where you kind of if the two different types of fake news. One of them because it's against what you kind of believe in.
That's what I
You're
was
like,
gonna say,
you're like,
yeah.
that's fake news
That's
anyway.
fake news, yeah, 'cause
But then
you
it's
don't
something that you
agree.
like, and you're like, that's probably not fake news.
I think in general, I think we're a generation that there's unprecedented expectation of accountability, which I think is extremely interesting because we're a generation of Google and Wikipedia. And if a politician tries to lie about anything or even slightly distort the facts from how many people attended the rally to whether they have a birth certificate from the United States of America, both issues that major political candidates have come under scrutiny for, I think you just Google it and you find out. And it's almost like technology and the media has raised the threshold of how much politicians can lie about, yet politicians forget that, and certain media outlets favoring a certain politician over another.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what you said though about how it's again positive bias. So when it comes to like for Donald Trump, the number of people who were at his
I tried not to name people
at his swearing-in ceremony, people who didn't agree were like, okay, this doesn't seem right. I don't think that he had more people than Obama there, but it's only the people who would go to actually find out that information who would care. I don't think his supporters actually are aware of that fact.
To them,
or,
that's probably fake news.
To them,
thing,
that is
right?
fake news. Exactly. Yeah.
So are we saying that fake news is a matter of perspective?
Well,
Some
no.
facts are.
I think
some
it's been
facts are facts.
overblown.
Facts are facts.
Facts are
Facts are
facts.
facts.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think with the whole fake news thing, to begin with, it was, bringing about the fact that we should keep an eye on what we're reading and make sure we do a bit of our own research. But like we've now mentioned, it's kind of turned into, if you don't agree or if it doesn't seem right, it's fake news. It's almost like
An attitude change.
it's
Yeah.
an attitude. It's fake news. It's not.
So the narrative and everything is now changing because of it's the mainstream media and the people, the elite, who are now running the narrative. So when you had governments or kind of systems where, even in the West at the time, where you had to they were here and people were here, and they were powerful, real power, and people didn't have much say, then the main focus on narrative was to try to hold them accountable. But now it's gone the other way around, whereas it's the powerful elites, whether it's the media or other areas, that people who are being scrutinized are no longer politicians, they're the voters. The ordinary voters are now being scrutinized. So whoever you vote, politicians, media people, or even ordinary people, then target the actual voters. I'm judging you for voting that way, instead of saying
100%,
judge the politician who said vote that way. You no longer, we still obviously criticize politicians, but then the main narrative is to scrutinize voters instead of the politicians.
That's so interesting. I didn't think of it like that. Like Brexiteers versus
Yeah.
Remainers, Republicans versus
Yeah,
Democrats, and I think also the way that we interact with politicians has changed massively. Like when you go 50 years ago, the way that politicians interact with each other is pretty much through political debates, or if a statement is released by their media office. But now you go on Twitter and you see tweets being offered. Has this change of attitude, or if you will, this higher accessibility that we have to politicians, also changed our attitude towards them? Is it because they're more accessible to us through tweets and stuff like that? Have we lost some respect for the idea of politics?
I think again it's kind of like in a family where you kind of cross the boundaries.
Exactly. Oftentimes.
Or like best friends. Politicians, there was always this boundary between them, us, and the media, and it's always been very kind of polite and professional. And now, because it's all out there, it's all so open, there are no boundaries. All sides basically get aggressive with each other, and so it's a good thing actually that, for example, you have like presidents or politicians tweeting and kind of interacting. That's a good thing technically, but because they have crossed the boundaries, everyone, there's no debate. It's just shouting and screaming. So.
Yeah, it's not a discussion. It's just noise at the end of the day.
Yeah, we were talking about this when we were going through the bullet points, and quite a lot of people said that what bothers them about politics is they talk about media and fake news and propaganda, but they also talked about greed and general character traits and lack of integrity. To what extent do you think this is true? Because we did say that it's been as old as time that politicians are a certain way, but surely people of every profession are a certain way too. So what do you think, being so involved in politics and having met quite a lot of politicians yourself?
So I personally think technically shouldn't be mutually exclusive. So characters obviously build up your ideas, obviously. But at the end of the day, always, Milton Friedman, the economist, said something interesting. Said, always judge a policy or program by its outcome, not by its intention. So whilst so it's always judged by the outcome regardless of the person's character. So yes, most of the time the character does create you who you are and what you believe in, what you can implement, good or bad.
Yeah.
But I could, for example, point out certain politicians that I wouldn't endorse them, their personality or their character, but the policies are working. So
Would you vote for a politician that has great policies but whose character you do not endorse?
Yeah, I don't vote based on emotions, so I only vote
based on facts.
yeah,
Very
facts.
rational.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
Facts
very-
don't care about your
As it should
feelings.
be.
Yeah.
Many people aren't
As if
like
that
that.
was- yeah.
Because I think that's the thing now. It's amazing that we have this social media platform where I guess we are interacting more with maybe not so the politicians, but well, in a way, you see what they tweet, you can retweet it. You have your followers, they can see what you retweet, etc. But yeah, it kind of loses some of the authenticity in ways as well.
100%.
But it's the other thing. So people always say that we want politicians to be like us, to be like normal, like ordinary, like with all the
Accessible.
flaws. Like us, what we do. And but if you want that, normal people out there, all of us, we do things, we do bad things, we say bad things. People technically don't want it. People still want the politician to be like so like clinical, so polished.
That's the thing.
That's
But-
the thing.
so you have to
social
pick one.
media
Yeah.
probably is. We feel like, oh, they're reaching out to us on Twitter,
Yeah.
they're saying this, but there might actually be a lot of, well, there is definitely a lot of background research before they even post
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
Even that's a marketing campaign. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
It's definitely like raised the levels for politicians and political parties. It's a whole other area there to look into
Yeah.
that no one would have looked into 30
Yeah.
years ago.
But in general, people have to pick a side. Do you
Yeah.
want a polished, kind of boring type of politician who's disconnected, or do you want them to be like us, flawed?
And I want to talk about this and what is it that makes a good politician. For a long time, we're all more understanding of the Kennedy paradigm, where you're a career politician, so you start from early. But now there's, I think, increasingly a rise worldwide of the businessman model, the Donald Trump model of the fact that you have a track record, you've run a business, and in that same way, you're able to run a country. Do you think good businessmen make good political leaders?
That new